I'd like to welcome you all. My name is Lynette Owens. I am the Vice President of Consumer Education and founder of our Trend Micro Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. And joining me is my colleague, Ron Russak. Ron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ron Russak. I am based in the Austin, Texas office, and I came to Trend Micro, 10 years ago or so, even before it was Trend Micro, through the Tipping Point products, and have been a CISSP for many years, and have been doing, cybersecurity and technology for over 30 years.
Fantastic. So tonight, we are going to cover quite a number of issues. And I think to get us started, I just would like to share our screen here and talk about a few ground rules and logistics for the evening. Again, if you're just joining us, welcome to Family Tech Talk Night. And we are awaiting our Spanish interpreter who is having a little bit of difficulty dialing in tonight. We hope that she'll be joining us shortly. And so we will hopefully have her joining us. And once she does, we will give you instructions on how to how you can actually listen to her instead of me and Ron. So welcome again. And let's see a few things as we proceed this evening. You can see that there's quite a number of you represented. You can't see who else is on this this event tonight, but we've been running this event actually for about 11 years with PTO Today. Before the pandemic, we did these in your schools. We actually came to your communities and gathered at your PTO or PTA meetings or school-wide or district-wide events that you chose to host. We hope to get back to that fully at some point, but the nice thing is that we're able to offer this virtually and have so many of you from coast to coast on the line at the same time with us. So welcome. A few things too. Again, we were having some technical difficulties with our interpreter, but she should be joining shortly. And if for some reason we have issues with that, just know that we have a number of these events going on through an entire school year, and we will always have someone available to listen to the sessions in Spanish in any number of those events. Every single one, we have a Spanish interpreter. So as soon as we're able to enable the chat, we will also repost the sign-in sheet. So the session, inclusive of questions, will run around 80 minutes. It could be shorter depending on your questions, but we typically get quite a few. There is a recording happening of the session. We will make that available to you through the person that organized this event at your school. So whoever that leader was that promoted this event to your school, that is the person with whom we have contact, and that is the person who will get a copy of the link to the recording. So please check in with them. And we do ask that all the questions be entered through the Q&A. And at the close of the session, we'll provide a link to a survey. Usually when you close out of Zoom, you will actually see the survey on a web page in front of you, but we'll provide that link as well later on. So we kind of want to get to know you a little bit now that you know a little bit about us. And so I think, Ron, I'll let you take this one while we go ahead and launch the poll.
Thanks, Lynette. So that we have a better idea of the audience that we're addressing tonight, the first question is, how old is your oldest child? 5 years old or younger? And there's a few more options here.
Yep.
There we go. So please go ahead and answer in the quiz who your oldest is, so we have an idea of what kind of crowd we're addressing tonight, because it varies from night to night. Lynette and I have been doing this a couple of times together for a couple of years now, And sometimes it's adults, sometimes it's children, sometimes it's mixture. So we like to have that idea.
Yep. Let me just escape that for a second.
Oh, everybody seems to be entering it into the
Q&A.
Q&A instead of answering in the chat.
There we go. I wasn't
there
able
we
to
go.
launch
There's the
poll.
poll.
Please answer through the poll if you can. It'll be a little bit easier for us to track.
There you go.
Oops, I launched the wrong question, actually. My fault.
Yeah, that's
our second question. What are you most interested in discussing tonight? And I'll end this poll and then we'll go back to the age. So this actually was our second question.
There it is.
What are you most interested in hearing about tonight? So it's managing screen time for your kids, helping them stick to age appropriate content, dealing with online bullying or hate, getting ideas for positive uses of the internet, and not sure, I'm just here to learn something new. So it looks like a lot of you had spread your answers across all these options. And the good thing is we're going to touch upon all of these. So, but a majority of you were really interested in helping your kids stick to age appropriate content, which leads me to believe when we go back to the first poll, here we go. The first poll again.
For age.
How old is your oldest child? Yeah, we're getting there. It looks like we do have one age group that's sort of winning over the other age groups. And we will end this poll in a second here. So how old is your oldest child? Oh, one of them's creeping up on the other. Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll now. So it looks like that sweet spot. I just got my first cell phone. I'm just starting to use Instagram, TikTok, maybe Snap. So wonderful. So it's great to see that a range of ages represented here tonight. So, I think what we want to do is set the tone here because, we've gone through quite a bit of change over the last 3 years now, almost with this pandemic and the relationship that children and you and them and technology have with each other. So, I thought it would be interesting to just say, where are we right now? And it looks like over the last couple of years, no surprise, daily screen time is up 17%, with kids ages 8 to 12 logging 5 hours and about 5.5 hours basically a day. And kids a little bit, 13 and above are 7+ hours a day. And also, this is a big change to me. I've been doing this work for 15 years now, and the fact that 65% of parents are saying that their child has their own phone, with the average age at 10 when they're getting their first phones. Some of you are not going to say yes at 10, and that is absolutely fine. Some of you said yes at 8, and that is absolutely fine too. Every family has their own reasons for doing that. There's certainly no hard and fast rule, but it doesn't surprise me that around the beginning of middle school, end of elementary school, that kids are starting to use that phone. One thing I want to, you might ask yourself, where do my kids sit in these statistics? Are they 5.5 hours, 7 hours or more, or are they less than that? It doesn't really matter. I think it just gives you a sense of where we are today as a country. Because increasingly, school is requiring that screen time. So it is inclusive of those hours too. And we have to keep in mind that not all screen time is equal. Not all of it is being spent on Discord or Roblox or Fortnite or TikTok. It certainly might feel like it though at times. So there are a lot of challenges and benefits to the fact that kids are adopting technology at younger ages and for greater periods of time. And that is why tonight's talk is really about what it means to help our kids be great digital citizens. So what is digital citizenship? Well, very often we think it's just about, and it's important to talk about risks, how to identify them and how to avoid them. Safety and security is an important element of digital citizenship, but you know what? So is digital literacy. Even if I teach my kids why it's important to protect your privacy online, do I even know how to turn on privacy settings? What tools are available to me to help me manage my privacy and security? Third is around ethics, how we behave within the context of online spaces and communities. What are the rules of engagement with others in those spaces, and so on. And finally, very often when we talk to kids about using technology, it's a really long list of what not to do. But we have to remember that technology is not going away. The internet is not going away. It's an incredibly important skill that our children need to learn how to master. And so we have to think about digital citizenship as much about what not to do as we do about what they should do. What are ways that we can not only teach, but also model good and productive and positive uses of the internet? So we like to organize the information that we want to share tonight around these 4 buckets. The first is be online. How do we as parents help our children by setting up the right environment, rules, and example for them? While you're there, be safe, meaning how do you protect your privacy, your personal information, and even your physical self? Be kind. And kindness is certainly something that children hear at young ages about how you direct that kindness towards others. But we have to remember that kindness is something to direct to ourselves as well. And finally, being savvy touches upon that issue of mastery. How do we encourage good habits with our kids when it comes to technology? And how do we teach them good uses of the internet? So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ron to talk a little bit about this first area.
So when the pandemic started, if you think about your work environment, some of the better companies used to have people on staff that would help set up your desk, your chair height, your keyboard height, things like that. With the pandemic, everybody kind of moved home. So really, we need to do the same thing at home and set up for our physical health. And that included a few different things that we should have been doing ourselves, which includes resting your eyes every 30 minutes, looking at 30 seconds, 30 feet away. That's one of the things. Getting your chair and keyboards at the right height again, getting your monitors straight ahead so you're not looking like this or looking like that for hours on end, and taking breaks on occasion. One of the nice things I did for myself is I did get a smartwatch, and it does remind me about every 30 minutes or every hour. It pops up and says, how about taking a walk or standing up and stretching? So it reminds me to keep moving. These things still apply, especially if we're still working from home. Of course, now a lot of children have returned to school, so this is kind of built in. At the end of class, you get up, you may move, et cetera, et cetera. Other things about the environment, we're working from home, setting up your router and setting up your network at home. Rule number 1 is limit access to your router. You have to put a password on it. Otherwise, your neighbors could be stealing your internet. In most situations, internet is still unlimited, but in those cases, especially where your internet is unprotected or you have a weak password or weak encryption set, somebody could be stealing your router or your internet capability and doing even nefarious things with it. So number 1, limit your access by setting up a password for the network. These days, most modern routers have multiple networks at the same time. One moment. One moment.
I can actually take it from here, Ron. I think one of the things that we do encourage.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay,
So
sorry.
modern routers should have what's a guest network. So one of the things is you can put some people on the guest network, some people on the primary network. A good thing to do is put your Internet of Things on the guest network, like your smart TVs, and put your computers on your network, your private network. Also, when your children bring their friends over, they can get on the guest network, and the router automatically protects you from their machines. So it brings kind of one of those work advantages of complex networking at home, but it makes it more complex because you have to set it up with separate passwords. But most of the routers today do that for you and can walk you through that. Another thing on routers is if your router doesn't have a guest network, it's probably too old. Router companies have been changing the colors of routers for the last couple of years, and my suggestion is your router should be black, because that is the color that most routers are these days. If you're still using one that's blue or green or white, it may be too old to support that feature, and you probably need to update it anyway. But doing that separate network helps isolate you from other things. For larger houses, you may need to use Wi-Fi extenders to get a good signal into all rooms. Back in the early days, before everybody had a wireless router, we didn't really have an issue, but these days, especially in apartments, everybody has a router and everybody could be on the same channel, or your neighbors is bleeding into your house and you got to be on a separate channel. And to get a good signal strength further from the router, you may have to use an extender. Typically, if you use an extender, the same brand as your own wireless modem, it will work better and apply and configure itself easier. And that is what we also call a mesh. Is just same again, just a router and multiple extenders makes that mesh. That's the more modern hardware. One other comment about this is, like I said, make sure you keep your router, you should have your own router and not use the cable company's wireless or your provider's wireless, because they control the software. If you have your own wireless router, you control the software and you can keep it up to date. That makes it much more secure. Flaws and security problems are found all the time on home routers, and there is a constant stream of updates and new versions. As long as you have your own router, you can keep that software updated. Another thing you can do is, if you have limited bandwidth, is stagger usage time. Your children's time to do homework is from 4 to 6. That means you're not streaming TV during those hours so that they have access to do their homework. After 7 p.m. is streaming time. That's when your smart TVs start streaming from all those multiple services. That way, you're staggering the use so you don't end up with congestion and network problems. Also, for your security, you really need to have security software on every device. That means, of course, your computers, your home computers, your tablets, your phones, your children's phones, your children's devices. The only exception is Chromebook, because there isn't any. But all other devices, you can install security software. You need to install it and keep it up to date. Most of those programs will turn on your firewall, which is built in even to Windows and Mac these days. But most security software will take that over and replace it with their own or manage it for you. but you want that turned on. What that does is prevent somebody unauthorized from getting into your computer. That's the function of a firewall. Another thing you need to do, of course, you hear this from your job if you're working and have technology, is use strong passwords. We'll get into that in a few minutes more in detail, what a strong password is. Basically, it is not something in the dictionary. Most sites now support multi-factor authentication. You may have that from your work environment. For example, your VPN, you may have a token that you have to push or answer, Duo, RSA keys, things like that. But even Yahoo, Gmail, and many other sites, especially your banks, you should be using multi-factor authentication. So even if they have your password, you can't get in. You still have to have something more. Another option available is to use a virtual private network. We think of that normally as adults and parents, as our work has a VPN, which allows us to get into our work environment from our home. These days, it's relatively inexpensive, and most security software offers a service to give you a VPN. That takes your home internet and makes it more anonymous by taking it through a VPN server somewhere else on the internet. This can help, again, other people from trying to steal your information. The downside of it is places like banks know who the VPN providers are and sometimes will block you from access. So it's a double-edged sword. But for most everyday purposes, the VPNs are fine. What else can we use or do? Remember, you have to update. The second Tuesday of every month is called Patch Tuesday. This is when Microsoft releases their monthly updates. So does Adobe. Microsoft and Adobe are the biggest software companies that have to do updates. It's not necessarily that they have the most flaws, but it's the most discovered flaws because they are both big targets. So both of them update on the second Tuesday of every month. That means Wednesday and Thursday is update day for you and all of your devices. Android updates when there is one available, provided by the phone carrier, and Apple and iOS provide their own schedule, essentially when they have one ready to go. We talked about strong passwords. I said don't use a dictionary, any word in the dictionary. Pretty much these days, every word in the dictionary has been hashed. Passwords are stored in the computer via a hash, which is a mathematic algorithm to come up with a number that is unique to the word. These days, every word in the dictionary has already been hashed. So if anybody ever obtains a hash of your password, they can instantly match it. So you have to make it stronger by making it a passphrase and change it often and use it different from every site. So MN2B MTPTS exclamation point might represent might need to buy more toilet paper soon. Of course, to change it for a different site, you could make it might need 3 to buy more toilet paper soon, might need 4 to buy more toilet paper soon. Because when you hash that, they will be completely different by changing the one digit. Making the passphrase is important, but you still have to be able to change it different for every site. The worst thing to do is to use the same password for your email, your phone, your banking, and everything else you do. The other thing is back up and store safely. You can back up still on an external USB drive, but you have to remember to do it often. You can back up to the cloud. The problem with the cloud is, you remember I mentioned the word hash. When you back up to the cloud, everything on your account is encrypted using your password. If you forget your password, it is lost forever, and that company cannot recover it for you because they don't know what your password was. It's all mathematical. Your password becomes a hash. That number goes into the formula of the encryption. There's no way to undo that. So you have to make sure you have your backup password backed up. So keep it stored safely. That also means if you're backing up on an external drive or a thumb drive, don't leave it plugged into the computer. Somebody breaks the window, takes your computer, they take your backup drive, you're still out of luck and you have nothing. You can also use encryption on your hard drive if you wish. Other things to help with your environment is to use tech tools, and this is where we're going to get into some details. A lot of our software these days and our programs that are in the cloud have tools to allow you to select age-appropriate contents, control in-app purchases, time how long you're online, and monitor. And it's also available on routers, devices, through your ISP, through your security software. There's multiple ways to get it, and it depends upon what you're doing and how secure you want to be. Routers these days usually partner with a security vendor and are an excellent way to enforce security and some limits in your environment at home. The really good routers with extra security involved in them and built in can run security software, keep you away from bad sites. You may also set the time limits for your children and other devices by device name in your router. If not, there's also software and other things to do, which we're going to get into. So we were talking about tech tools. One of them is iOS screen time. Lynette, you want to tell us about that?
Absolutely. And I don't know, Kimberly, if the chat was enabled yet or not, or if people are able to chat. And if you are, go ahead and put something in the chat. It looks like there's one message in there now, but I don't know if that's just you, Kimberly, able to chat. And if other people are able to say anything in the chat, please let us know where you're dialing in from. You saw earlier on tonight how many states and schools are represented tonight. If you're not, don't worry about it. We'll just take messages through the Q&A. Oh, great! It's lighting up. Awesome. All right. Awesome. Yes. So there's a link in there. We might have to post it a few times, Ron and Kimberly, as I'm talking, to have people sign in to let us know they're here tonight. So thank you for using the Q&A anyway to try and communicate with us. In this next section is where we typically get a ton of questions. And because in our early poll, many of you said, I'm most interested in knowing how to make sure that the content my children are viewing is in fact age appropriate. So let's talk about some of the apps and devices that your kids love the most. I am going to go really fast through this, and then we will pause for reviewing the Q&A to see what questions you have. So tell us in the chat, how many of you are Apple families? How many of you have kids using iPads, iPhones? I heard a rumor that the iPod Touch might still be around. I've seen sightings of the iPod Touch.
We still have an iPod Touch and we still use it for music.
I still have the actual the iPod Nano for just music, right? Those days. Great. So maybe some of you are already familiar with iOS screen time. Maybe some of you are not. Just very briefly though, in the settings, you can find a way to find something called screen time. And there you can select your family member that's on your Apple account as a family, choose that person, and you can do things like see what their usage of the apps are, limit which apps they're allowed to use, even how long they're allowed to use them. The thing I like about tools like this or any other kinds is not just the ability to lock things down. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes the kids, you notice they're taking too long to get homework done, but boy, they've been on TikTok for a long time, so it might be time to put that setting on, and that's great. But the most important thing that happens with these tools is the conversation that ensues, the conversation that can enable you to say, you know, I noticed that you're taking a little longer to get your homework done. You're getting to bed a little later than maybe you should be. And we know how important sleep is. I also noticed that you've been on Instagram quite a bit. And, you know, what do you think we need to do about this? And, you know, having that dialogue with your kids, I think, can be very powerful, regardless of the tech tool, whether it's from Apple or Google or whoever. But anyway, I won't belabor screen time. If you're not familiar with it, please take a look at it. You will need to set up each of your children and their devices under your Apple same account so that you can enable this on their devices. And you can restrict the kinds of content that they can download from the iTunes store by age. You can limit the amount of time, as I said. How about Android families? Let us know in the chat. Where are the Android? Samsung, maybe the Pixel phones, any Google families out there? Let us know. If you're not already familiar, they too have a setting for families similar to what Apple has done with screen time called Google Family Link. They just recently, within the last day, have redesigned this. You don't just have to download the app anymore. There is a web-based version of Google Family Link. Just go to their website, search on Google Family Link, and you'll find it there. And from that web page, or from if you choose to use the app, you can do things like limit the kinds of apps they can download. You can even limit what kind of content, you know, when you download a new app and it asks, can I have access to the camera? Can I have access to your contact list? Can I have access to the microphone? All of those things you're able to control from this centralized place. Typically only with apps downloaded from the Play Store or being used on the Chrome browsers. Okay. Apple's works with Apple's devices. Google's works with Android devices. Anybody's kids like YouTube? Ever heard of it?
Of course,
I'm sure
third-party tools, Lynette,
right.
third-party tools such as Trend,
Yes.
Maximum Security, and other products similar also can offer parental controls and link them together if needed.
Yep.
Especially if you're in a mixed environment, because the same software can install on both Android and
That's correct.
Apple products. Go ahead.
That's correct. Yep. So just one thing to know, that finally, instead of worrying about your kids just, you know, they're watching one video on YouTube and then all of a sudden you have no idea what's going to be played next. And sometimes it's just really not appropriate. So they did last year launch what's called the YouTube supervised account. It requires you to have a Google account. You don't have to be an Android user. You can be an Apple device user and have a YouTube supervised account. You just need a Google account. And your child, then you can limit the kind of content on videos they'll see based on 3 settings. Explore, which is about, you know, ages 8 to 10 or 11. Explore More, which is about 11 to, you know, 14 years old. And most of YouTube, which takes you up to the age of 17. Everything up until adult content is what most of YouTube setting means. So again, it depends on your needs, your child's readiness to see content of those different age ranges. But look into that if you're worried about limiting what they're actually seeing on YouTube. This was really long needed setting. My kids are older now, but I wish I had it when they were younger. Okay, I know I'm going to get a mix of answers in the chat here. Who lets their kids use TikTok? Yes or no in the chat? Yeah. I get really strong reactions on one of those answers very often, which is usually no way or not yet. And then there's a few of you that are fine with it, and that's fine. But just, you should know, if you don't already, about a setting that they launched at the beginning of the pandemic. It wasn't because of the pandemic, they just happened to time it then, called TikTok family pairing. TikTok family pairing is a very nice way of easing your child and you into the TikTok experience. So where do you go? You go to a setting called digital well-being and you select family pairing, and you will need to download TikTok onto both your device and your child's device because one is basically controlling the other. So once you designate the parent device, and once you've done it for both, and you as a parent now are able to limit the amount of time they spend on TikTok, who actually they can message with through the app, and even a setting that just sort of filters content that isn't, it's mostly filtering, you know, adult kind of content, stuff that's not age appropriate, and it works pretty well. So this is a good way if you're not ready for your child to just full on see everything on TikTok yet, to ease you and them into the process. Instagram also finally updated their ability for you to, you can't fully control what your child is doing on Instagram, but you could see, you have more visibility into who's following them, who they're following. You can do things like limit the time that they're on it. But I encourage you to take a look at Instagram's Family Center, and it's called it's a tool called Supervision, which again gives you more information to have those conversations with your kids, because the best tool of all is communication. Any kids like Roblox? Probably one of the fastest growing apps out there. If you're not familiar with Roblox, it is not a game. It is a community of games and game developers. And I think wrongly, there's an assumption that only 10-year-olds play Roblox. Most of the games are very benign, innocuous, really fun. But sometimes, even with all the settings, there can be some inappropriate, like the clothing that the avatar is wearing has a curse word on it, which is hard for Roblox to actually create a setting to blur that out or limit that. So I'm showing you a very quick video of, check out their settings, because they also have things like, what do you call this? Setting up two-step verification, limiting who can message them, limiting who they can message with. You do have to set up a password to begin to set up these settings, and your child will not be able to undo those settings unless they have that password. So once you set that, it should stay as is until you go back in with the password and change it. Okay. So if you're not familiar with all of those settings in Roblox, please do become familiar. Anyone here of Discord? Discord actually has been around for quite a long time, and it was really the domain of gamers who used servers to, watch each other game, communicate with each other, and so on. It was for communities of gamers. But because of the pandemic, its popularity started rising again, and only recently did Discord start really hiring staff to and policies that follow things like Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook around safety. So they're getting better at it. Discord is actually, it's basically like a super chat room where you can create private groups and talk to each other, or you can follow other groups of things you might like your kids might want to join a community of people who love Harry Potter or the MCU universe or whatever. But then there's also content that maybe isn't appropriate for them. So you really do need to pay attention. And I'm just showing you some screenshots of things that you can do to, keep them a little bit safer on Discord. I would still highly encourage you to stay super involved, become familiar with any app that your child is using. You don't need to use it heavily. Just try to understand what are the settings and features available to keep them safe. For the gamers out there, Xbox launched an app over the last couple of years. It might have been 3 or 4 years ago now, called Family Settings also. And you can actually, from your phone, while your child is on the Xbox, they can ask you for more screen time and you can say yes or no without having to go to the other room where they're playing. They can also request, can I play with this other person or not? And you can decide through that app, yes or no. Again, great tools. Have those conversations. Why are they asking to play more? Who is this person that they're asking to play with? And so on. Ron had actually mentioned the fact that a lot of these apps and settings are specific to those devices or those apps. So we at Trend Micro, because we've been doing this education program for 15 years now, we decided to turn some of our engineering effort towards offering a tool free to families called Trend Micro Family. And what we're trying to do is hook into all of those apps we just talked about, so that you only have to do it from one place rather than having to go to this device and then this device and then that app and so on. We're working on it. We would love your feedback. Give it a try. It's no cost to you at all. We just want to make it the best tool that we know is useful for families and from the learnings we've had over the last 15 years of doing this program. Ron, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we are going to pause for questions after.
So to summarize this, we ask that you set the rules. And by you, that doesn't mean you alone. That means with your children, sit down and work with them on what apps they can use. What can they do on those apps? When is it appropriate for them to use their computer or their phone? How long can they do it? How many more hours beyond the normal school day? Can they watch can they watch YouTube videos all night long? No. How long? Where can they do this? And with whom? We need you to start the dialogue with them. When my children were growing up, we had a family computer that sat in the family room. That controlled where it was. At the time, my child was very interested in Minecraft. That was before Microsoft owned it. Back when it was more like Roblox. And he would make videos with his friend, but they would be sitting in the room off to the side of the room. We could still see what they were doing and monitor what they were doing. So we could control when, what, where, and with whom, because it was in the family room. No going to inappropriate sites, but if something popped up, we would be there to correct it or explain it or whatever needed to be done. So work with your children to establish these rules. It's important because we only have 24 hours in a day. So think of very quickly, how much time, make a list, go ahead and fill that out. How much time do you need for sleeping, meals, school and homework, reading, hobby, time with family, friends, or neighbors? We may be getting out of the house now. That means back to playing out in the yard with the neighbors. How much time is left over? Not a whole lot. Do you want them to spend that time online? This also applies to you. Don't be a parent that's do as I say, not as I do. If the rule is no phones at the dinner table, that means you also. Now, that means if it's in the other room and it rings and you're on call 24/7 like I am, you may excuse yourself from the table and go check, but that doesn't mean it's at the table interrupting the meal with everyone else. So remember that rule too when you apply these 24 hours and these rules to yourself.
And I think it's a great exercise. It's a good way to think about screen time, because I think a lot of parents fret over whether or not their child is using screens too much. And very simply, if you talk to your child about using this rubric to say, well, how much time have you spent doing these things in green, blue, and pink? Have you done them? If you have, then you've done a lot of things that are really good for your body, for your brain, and for your relationships. So it's okay to say yes sometimes to a little bit of extra screen time if that's what you want to do, because it means that all these other parts of their life and day are not suffering because of it.
Another idea that my family implemented was we made a charging bay down in the kitchen. We had a 2-story house. We had a drawer, put a power strip in it, and put all the chargers. That means the kids had to put their phones into that charging bay every night, so it was not in their room. They could not wake up in the middle of the night and get on the internet. But that's where they went to go to sleep and to charge overnight. So just another idea of how to control when they're out of sight.
My kids still do it and they're teenagers. So I trained them
Mine are
well.
older now.
Yeah. I think we just want to leave you with the section of, of all these things that we're saying you can do to limit your kids, to monitor your kids, to set expectations of your kids. We've really got to hold the mirror up to ourselves and ask yourself, what example do you set? Is it a situation where you're having to basically say, do as I say, but not as I do? It is, as you know, far more difficult to expect that they're going to behave as you wish if you yourself are not setting those examples. So, put it in the chat. What rules do you have for yourself? I have one that I don't stick to very well, and that is not to look at my phone right before going to bed. Yeah, it's a rule. I just don't follow it as well as I could. But what rules do you have for yourselves as parents?
So that is the largest chapter, just to let you know. Things will go a little faster now.
Yes. So on protecting privacy, I think what we want to say here is that it's obviously an important thing to do, but very often I think our world has changed to the point with social media that everything has to be documented, and then we have to tell everybody what it is we're doing at all times. And that's, it's just very common. It's a norm. But when we had the opportunity in the past before the pandemic to actually sit with students directly in classrooms, the way we actually like to talk about privacy is a little bit different. And so, obviously, this is a screenshot of Fortnite for those of you with children who love that game. Use whatever settings are available. Use the strongest settings you can that still allows you to do what you want with the app or game or device. But make sure the minute you download a new game or app, do it right away, because it's never really set the way you would want it by default. There's only 2 apps I know of that for anybody under the age of 16 has the privacy settings set to the strongest level. Those 2 apps are TikTok and Instagram. But no other apps do that by default. So you got to get in there and make sure you're not chatting with people. You're not letting your kid just play with strangers if that's not what you want right off the bat, and so on. But the other thing about privacy that I think is really important is, why is it that why do people want to know so many things about us, right? And we typically ask kids, question like, is Instagram free? And they'll say, well, I didn't really pay any money to download it. But other kids will start to wonder, well, I didn't pay for it, but they are collecting my personal information. And I think that's the conversation. That is the way to frame the conversation around privacy, because privacy settings are good to protect you from people you don't know, right? But privacy settings do nothing to protect your privacy from the company whose app or game or device you're using. You know, Apple likes to talk a lot about how they are the best for privacy. The problem is, as you know, they're collecting all kinds of data about you. That's how they tell you on Sunday mornings that your screen time went up 16%, or you can even see how many times you picked up the phone and so on, right? There is nothing protecting the privacy between you and the company whose app or game or device you're using. And that is why it's really important we remind our children that is the business of free. When an app says they're free, it isn't. You're paying with a different currency, and that is your personal information. So somebody's tracking it, somebody's collecting it, and because it's being collected, somebody could also steal that. You don't know. So behaving in a way online as if everything pretty much is not private is the best way to go. As soon as you're on the internet, we tell the kids, welcome to your public life. So another thing about safety is around protecting your information. So Ron, I'll let you take this section.
So protecting information, and to going back what Lynette said, remember a few years ago, Facebook was caught selling your private information through their analytics to third-party companies around election time. So you gave that up because they were tracking what you liked and what you didn't like, put you into categories, and filtered you up, down, and sideways. Another thing that steals your information is these kind of things. Poison search results, free offers, or high interest content in social media, fake social media. So poison search results, that's when fake sites get highly ranked and get you to click on them, and then they infect your machine. Free offers, nobody's going to give you a free iPad or a free phone or free account for gaming. What they're doing is they're trying to steal your information. Yeah, you want your free offer. What's your name, phone number, and address? Now they have all that information. Now they can start to try to impersonate you. Get you to click on Fortnite link for cheat codes, again, to steal the information. And fake social media like breaking news, Lady Gaga found dead. I even get ads like that on Facebook, and they just keep changing the name of the celebrity, but the content of the actual thing is the same every time. It's just a different celebrity each time. You know, I think, what is it? Tragic end for insert here. And it gives you the name of some celebrity. And if you click on it, you're under attack because you have taken your website, you have pointed your browser at a hostile site that will begin to attack you. All browsers have vulnerabilities, all. There is not a single one that doesn't. Some are better than others. But I work in security, and I can tell you every single day there are new vulnerabilities found in every single browser. If you're on the internet, you can become a victim of installing software, malware, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
So we wanted to take a moment and pause for our last question here, but here we don't have it in the polling. We'll just ask you to put it in the chat. But do any of your kids have a cell phone? You can say yes, no, not yet, but soon, or not for a few more years. Because we think that the phone usage is probably one of the most critical moments, especially since the majority of you have, your oldest child is between 11 and 14. They're really at the beginnings of their life with a phone. I'm sure you all have your stories of interesting mishaps, maybe of the use, maybe lost already within a month of having it, maybe broken, shattered screens. Maybe they didn't have a password on it and someone got a hold of it and started texting people as if it were them, and so on. So how any of your kids have their own phone?
And I just had a thought with that. a lot of parents may hand down their 3 and 4-year-old phone to their children because they don't need the super powerful latest and greatest. There's a downside to that. Older phones are no longer supported sometimes, which means there's no security updates. That means they are more susceptible to being hacked or having malware installed on them. So you may want to consider not giving them an older phone with like Android 5 on it because they haven't patched Android 5 in 5 years. So depending upon what they do with it, if they're using it for a phone, that's fine. But if they're using it for email, not Facebook, TikTok, whatever, Instagram, A, it could be too old to even support the software, and B, it could be much more vulnerable to attack, being an older device.
One of the
May be
things
better off with a newer, lower cost device.
Yeah, so what we did for my kids is we actually did a prepaid plan. Actually, it was a smartphone, but we limited the number of numbers that were on it, the capability with it, and we just put, $50 at a time on it. And we told the kids that every time you send a text, every time you use it in any way, that money is ticking down. And we may have over indoctrinated them to the point where my daughter, when she was younger, I told her to text me as soon as she got home from the bus because I had to pick up my younger one. And she was alone for about 10-15 minutes. She wouldn't even text, "Hi, Mom, I'm home now." She would just send me the icon of a bus, and that was it. She was worried that by putting too many characters, the money was going to run down. So I'm like, I think I'm okay with that. But that is an option, and we like that because they learned to budget their time on it because they thought the money was going to run out. So the thing about the phones that I want to have this conversation, because very often people don't have this conversation about the phones, and kids love those phones because of many things like games, but they really love that camera because that camera lets them take selfies with their friends, make videos, put up on TikTok or YouTube, take pictures of the family dog or pet or places that you've been or people that they love. And they should do that. And we should all do that. And that's a great use of the phone and the camera. But we also work very closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Washington, D.C. And many of you know them from the 1-800 The Missing. They used to have the pictures of the kids on the back of the milk cartons. But one of the trends that they've been seeing over the last, it's probably been 5 to 8 years now, but certainly accelerated during the pandemic, was not of stranger danger. It was of young people creating images and videos of themselves that they really wouldn't want the whole world to see. Now, not in all cases were kids being coerced to send those kinds of images to a complete stranger. Sometimes it's a peer at school saying, "Send me a pic." I think you all know what I mean when I say that kind of picture, right? And so they feel pressured into doing that because they've got a crush on this person, or because they think everyone else is doing it, or they don't want to be seen as a prude or whatever. We need to remind our children to never, ever, ever feel pressured by anyone to take that kind of picture or video of themselves, and certainly not send it to anybody, even if it's someone known to them or someone that they think they can trust that won't send it on to other people. Frankly, just the mere act of taking the photo puts them at risk, because if everything is being backed up to the cloud automatically, like an iPhone to iCloud or an Android phone to Google Cloud, there's already another copy of it out there. You're already putting yourself at risk by just the mere fact of taking the photo. So,
and how many celebrity photos have been found in the cloud and exploited?
Right. So please have that conversation with your kids. If you have not yet given them a phone, make sure you have that part of the conversation when you do. And if you already have already given your child the phone, please have that conversation. There's another thing I wanted to share with you about these kinds of images because they are quite on the rise among young people. And that is, a parent once asked me in a parent session, it was probably 70 years ago now, big auditorium. And he said, my kid is a really good kid, and everybody likes him. He's just very a good kid. Everybody likes him. What if he receives one of those pictures and didn't ask for it? I'm worried because the phone bill's in my name. What do we do if that happens? And here's what you should do. And this is why it needs to be part of the conversation you have with your children about the phone and the camera. If they ever receive an image that is disturbing in any way, shape, or form, they need to be able to come to you and let you know. The door must be open without judgment from you. And there's many reasons for this. Number one, it's very traumatic if it's something they were not expecting, right? It can be very traumatic for the child, even if it's someone known to them who sent it. Maybe even more so if it's someone known to them. The second is we don't advise at all for you to forward that on to anyone. Delete it, okay? The act of creating, possessing, and distributing images like that of underage children is technically a felony. But law enforcement is not going to punish young people, sharing it among themselves necessarily. The problem is the phone is in your name as the parent. And that is why it's very important to communicate and to delete. And the action your child takes is to tell you and delete it. The action you then can take is, if you know the parents of the child who sent it, maybe you can have a conversation with that parent. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, maybe you can report it to the school. But take action, because if that image somehow actually went to lots of different people, there will be an investigation and they will know that it went to the phone owned under your name, but you have taken action and gone on record as having taken action. Okay. That's a word about the camera. The same goes with gaming. I think kids can have lots of fun doing that. And during the pandemic, I know my son, that was his way of staying connected to his friends, was through games. It wasn't even the game itself. It was just a way to stay connected. But because they're out there with anyone, they could be gaming with anyone. We want to make sure, and you need to make sure, you feel comfortable with who they are engaging with online. One tip I might recommend is checking in on them regularly and maybe not allowing the earphones. Fortnite is a game riddled with fun and collaborative work, but sometimes they like to really rib each other while they're playing in a battle royale scenario, and the language can kind of go downhill really fast. So I loved having my son not use his headphones. I could hear the other children, and I would walk in and say, "Who are you playing with, buddy?" And he'd say their name, and I would say, "Oh, hello," and they could hear me, and they would say hello back over the television. So it really kept them in check, and sort of the temperature and the mood a little more moderate than if the headphones were on. And now that he's much older, I don't want to hear a thing. But this was back when he was 9, 10, 11 years old. Ron, I'll take this part if you're okay with that.
Okay.
Okay. I think one of the things that we want to stress again is, as we said earlier tonight about kindness, I think it's really important that we tell kids, hey, it's the right thing to do, right? You hear from kindergarten on what it means to be a good friend, what it means to take care of others, and so on. So that doesn't change. That doesn't change just because someone doesn't really know who you are. They only know you by some screen name or handle on social media. It doesn't change that you should treat people differently. Treat them as if they were in front of you. But for all the reasons we said before, someone's tracking it all. Someone is tracking it all. So everything you're doing online everything you say, who you friend, who you follow, what you like or give a heart to, everything you download, watch, all of it is being tracked. So everything we do and say online reflects on who we are. And the question is, if someone were to add all that up, who would they say you are? Would they say that you're someone who's kind or not? And kindness isn't just about being nice. It's not just about saying nice things and being nice. It means respecting things like their privacy. Like, so much drama can happen in middle school in particular. When those kids get the phone for the first time, start taking group selfies, start posting them up on social media, and one person doesn't really like how they look in that picture. And behind the other person's back who posted it says, well, of course she liked that, but she looks good and none of the rest of us do. And, and then it spirals into just drama behind the scenes. So it's not a bad idea for all of us, as well as our kids, to say, hey, are you okay if I post this? Is you good with this? I think it's just, if we would all do this for each other, I think it could lead to less drama and unkindness online. I'm sure some of you have had pictures of you posted online that you didn't realize was being posted and didn't want it to be posted, and may have even asked someone to take it down afterwards, but it can feel really awkward. So let's head that off. Let's start with, are you okay with this, before I post it? And with kids, especially in any age, right? Every family has different rules. Every family decides when you're allowed to start dating, walk home from school on your own, have a sleepover, watch a rated R or PG-13 movie. And the same goes with technology. There are kids who will not be allowed to play that first-person shooter video game for some time. And there are other kids who are playing it at age 8 and 9 already. There are kids who are going to be having that phone at 10, and others who won't have one until they're in 8th or 9th grade. We have to remind our kids that part of kindness is respecting that every family has their own rules. And we should not exclude others because they don't yet have a phone. Find a way to include them in plans you're making over chat, over text, if they don't have a phone. That's one thing I stress with my kids, because there were kids that didn't have phones until 8th grade, but mine did at 6th. Hey, did you include so-and-so? Because they're not in the group chat. So you better call them, like actually call them and speak on a phone to them. Rules around when they're allowed to be online and offline, again, those vary from family to family. So that respect can come in all kinds of forms, and kindness too. But being kind to ourselves as well is important. And I do think someone asked this question about the anxiety that comes with social media. One of the things we've got to remind our children is that you, me, we all feel great when we post something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and a whole bunch of people comment and like it. Feels good, right? It feels good. And when you're a teenager, when you feel good, you feel real good. And when you feel bad, you feel real bad. And that's very age appropriate. But we've got to remind our kids that they are not equal to the number of likes, comments, reshares, whatever. They are not equal to that. They are so much more than that. And it's our job as parents to keep on reinforcing this message and building them up to say, don't put your whole value in what is there on social media, because you and I know people try to present a perfect version of themselves that is not reality. Yeah, everyone's working on that curation all day long on those social networking sites. And so we just need to make sure that our children are feeling valued in many other ways. And some kids, I think, can get really wrapped up into tying their value 100% on how they are perceived on social media only.
Something to share with them, if I may inject, the quality of their friends is much more important than the quantity. Somebody could get 400 or 500 likes on a picture, and next year you have no idea who those 400 people are. You don't know them. They all just vanish. Or would you rather have 4 people that liked your picture, and next year you still converse with those 4 people? As somebody told me years ago, and that I have discovered is true, a true friend is somebody you haven't seen in years, and you get together and you meet, you share experiences and what you've done, and it's like you haven't been separated for the last 10 years. I am finding that out about my true friends from college. When we get together, now that we've all had kids and they've all moved out, we catch up within a couple of hours and we're right back to where we were before. That's the kind of relationship we need to teach our children to have, not the quantity, the quality.
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt.
absolutely. No, no worries. It's a great message, you know. And I think coupled with that is there are ways that we and as parents can nurture kindness online. Again, as we've said earlier, communication and support is most important. You know, the researchers at the Cyberbullying Research Center and some other organizations that we work closely with, it is proven that the children who get into trouble most, both online and offline, are the ones who have no support system. Okay. And your child might get knocked down here and there. There might be a comment, a snide comment that doesn't land very well with them. That might happen. But as long as they feel like there's somebody they can turn to when those moments arise, most kids are resilient and can bounce back. And in many cases, you know, we really try to encourage a model of resilience where you change your mind shift and you say, you know, those who hurt. You know, think that the person who's being mean is probably in pain for some reason in some way, and you put it back on them instead of taking it personally. And it's a good skill for even adults, I think, to practice, because there's no lack of vitriol on the internet. The question is, how well do we develop our own immunity to it? And those are the kinds of practice conversations that we can have with our children. So be supportive, help them think, you know, it's not necessarily you. It probably isn't you, it's that person. And for some reason, they're lashing out, right? Put it on that other person. I also think it's important as parents to be prepared. And I ask you to think of 2 questions, and hopefully you will never have to go back to the answers, but write these down and keep these notes to yourself. The first question is, what would you do if someone was bullying your child online, was being unkind to your child online? What would you do? And the second is, what would you do if it was your child who was being unkind to another or others online? You know, a lot of times we don't want to think it's our own kid, but kids are kids. They make mistakes. And they sometimes get swept up into peer pressure situations too. So what would you do? Be prepared. We are big proponents of the Cyberbullying Research Center. I highly recommend them as a resource. Great resources on what to do in situations, in either of those situations, as parents. Great organization that we're big fans of to help you through that. And finally, show them what kindness looks like through your own behaviors, but also, you know, when you're scrolling through Facebook and you find that story, you know, that story somewhere online that says, oh my gosh, I have faith in humanity again. Look how wonderful this group of people was, or these 2 people were, or something that someone did for a complete stranger. It happens. We just don't hear about it. Our world doesn't seem to favor the good news stories. And so do share those when you find them. When you find those stories happening online, share that with your kids so they know it's not all despair out there. We're going to close with this last section, and then we'll turn to questions. I think, Ron, if it's okay, I'll just fly through these
Sure.
last few slides. I think the first is around being able to distinguish with what you can trust and what you cannot online. It's way too easy for someone to pretend to be someone that they're not. It's too easy to put something out there as if it is truth when it is not. It's really easy to use things like deep fakes and make a video that seems to look like it's Tom Cruise, but it's actually not Tom Cruise doing or saying what the video is showing or so on, right? Way too easy. So we are big fans of the National Association for Media Literacy Education, and we worked with them to develop a parent guide to how to start thinking critically about the things you see on the internet. The biggest thing you can help them with is to develop a pause button. When you see a video, a picture, a news story, anything that evokes a really strong emotion out of your kids or you, that's flag number one. Okay, that's a reason to pause and say, wait a minute, is that for real? It could be, but pause, right? The second skill is to ask questions before you believe it, before you share it, before you comment on it, before you do anything with it, and ask questions. I won't read all of them here. They actually are within this guide that we developed with, namely, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, and you're welcome to review that. It's only a few pages. We highly recommend that's something you review, and we'll go through our resources at the end of the session today. On encouraging good habits, in the chat, can you please tell us, have you ever looked yourself up online? And if so, what did you find? Have you ever looked yourself up, your own name, on a search engine? And if you have, what did you find? Put that in the chat. And
while you're doing that,
yeah,
going back to the point about keeping the conversation going and being prepared, we've got to keep the door open. Bumps will happen. Something will happen. Your child will need that support. You have to have the open door and address it in a way that is not emotional first, if that makes sense. The advantage of that, and a good example, one of my children has moved away, wrecked his car. You have two responses. One is, oh my gosh, you broke the car I bought for you. How could you? Or the response is, are you okay? I don't care about the car. We can fix that later. That's the kind of response you need to have when your child comes to you. Somebody sent me a dirty picture. That's okay. We will just delete it and unfriend them, or something to that. Not, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Be calm, address it, then go have your own meltdown later.
Behind the scenes, yes.
As parents. But the end result is you do pretty good with your kid if you have that kind of communication open.
Yes. So I'm not able to see the chat in my screen view right now because I've got two screens going here, but I assume some of you have in fact looked yourself up online and found some interesting things. So one of the things that the reason we encourage this as a good habit is that, and we have found this to be true in polling young people out there, ask your kids. I bet they've looked themselves up, and sometimes they're going to find something that is public that they didn't know was there. But many times it's innocuous, like, oh, there was a picture of me in the news because I helped to raise money for the school, or I'm an athlete and I had some great accomplishment, or I perform on stage, or I'm a musician, so on. So that's fine if you're okay with what you're finding out there that's public about your kids. The second thing you might find is your cyber twin, somebody who shares your name but is not actually you. And it's good to pay attention to your cyber twin because there may be things that the person who has your name is doing that you don't want associated with you. So these are the two reasons that you want to pay attention to the fact of what is out there that's public about you. And you can do this if you use Google as your search engine. You can set a Google alert by going to google.com/alerts. And all you have to do is put in your kid's name. You can put in your own name. I use this for work because I like to be alerted when there's news about TikTok or Twitter or whatever. You could set up any alert that you want. In this example, it was setting it up for our company, Trend Micro. And you'll get an email daily, weekly, however often you want, whenever it is a publicly indexable content. So anything being posted about you behind privacy settings will not show up in public. Okay, this is only publicly indexable content. Last year, Google launched the ability for you to have removed from their search engine stuff that's showing up about you that you don't want showing up on Google search. So that's a new feature that they just launched last year. What I would recommend on that is, first of all, do that if you find something you don't like about you or your kids out there. But remember, it's only being removed from Google search. It's still on the internet somewhere. It's just Google can only remove it from their spots. But whoever's actually hosting it is really the people you need to go ask to take it down. Okay? That's another one good habit. And finally, we're going to close with this statistic. For those of you who said you have 15, your oldest kids are 15 and above, but even for those of you with children who are younger. Every year, the Kaplan Institute are the people who actually create the PSAT, preparatory materials, that kind of stuff. And they started researching, interviewing college admissions officers and universities all across the US, probably around 8-9 years ago now. And back then they would ask, hey, beyond the application that a student submits, do you also look them up on the internet? And the first year that they asked this, 25% said yes. Then 30 the following year, then 35, and so on, right? It's just kept going up. Now, realistically, are they really going to look at every kid online? Probably not, because they get thousands and thousands of applications. But when it comes to the case of someone that they're just not sure about, they will do that. And in the most recent study, which was this February, 66% said they would. But what's interesting about this is the question that follows. The question that follows is, so if you looked, what did you find? And of the people who did search online, 57% found something that they didn't find very favorable, that probably swayed them in a direction to say, you know what, I don't think this is a student for us. But 38% found something that convinced them this was in fact someone they wanted in their community. And that's not a small number, and we'll continue to follow this to see if it rises or not. But that is fully in the hands of you and your kids. And that is why when we talk about mastery, yes, if you do everything that we talked about so far, use privacy settings, be kind, don't do this and don't do that, they might find nothing. They'll look your student up and they'll find nothing. But imagine that they're comparing them to another student who's equal to them in some way, and the other student has figured out how to use the internet in really positive ways that is visible to this admissions officer. Who do you think has the advantage? That is one of the reasons why we say, let's encourage our kids also to use the internet in ways that are going to be good for them, that's good for others, and that is even good for the world around them. Positive uses like learning new skills or promoting a cause that really matters to them, raising funds for an organization that really needs the help. They can use, apps like Huddle and even YouTube to showcase their accomplishments if they're an athlete or a performer or musician, a blog if they're an artist or a writer. And I'm a big fan of contests, because contests for writing or video making or whatever are a wonderful construct to use the internet for a good purpose, learn how to follow rules, learn how to be critiqued and evaluated by someone else. And gosh, you might even win a prize. But even if you don't, you can start to create a portfolio of all the contests that you've entered, and that is a positive use of the internet. So with that, we just want to wrap it up by saying that being a good digital citizen encompasses a whole lot more than just being safe and just making sure that there's no strangers talking to you, or that you're not looking at age inappropriate content. We hope that you as parents use this framework to think about all of the ways that your world, your child's world, and the internet intersect, and that you find the path that makes it the most positive and productive one for them and you. And we want to encourage you, especially for those of you with kids ages 7 to 10, many of the things we talked about tonight are things your kids can do at home through our Cyber Academy for Kids. Small little 2-minute videos that talk about strong passwords or how to protect privacy or so on. And it's followed by an online Kahoot quiz and an activity sheet if you choose to print it out, and even a conversation guide for you as parents to have those conversations with those younger kids. For you as parents, we encourage you to see all of our resources. They're actually available in multiple languages at trimmicro.com/internet-safety. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And also with our partner PTO Today, they have a number of resources on their website as well, which you can find here at this URL. Finally, we encourage you to keep it going. Stay actively involved and educated about issues related to your kids and technology by having conversations with them, having conversations with your schools and how they're using tech in the classroom, and having conversations with the other parents in your community. Make it an ongoing thing, and stay up to date by following. You can follow us online. You can follow any number of great organizations that I mentioned earlier that you'll find on our website. And we have one favor to ask. We have two favors to ask. The first is, do one new thing that you didn't do before tonight. Maybe you turn on 2-step verification. Maybe you change that password on your router. Maybe you have that conversation with your kids about the camera. Whatever it is, just pick one. Do one new thing. And the second favor we have to ask is, when you close out of Zoom today, there's going to be a feedback form that comes up. It takes you 2 seconds. I'm going to ask Kimberly or Ron if you could go ahead in the chat. And once again, if you didn't sign in when you joined us today, the link to sign in hopefully is there in the chat.
It's been posted again.
Awesome. I'm going to escape from here for a moment.
It is sign in, not sing in.
Awesome. And we do want to go to the Q&A here. Are there questions? Are we able to? Do we want to address some of these?
Somebody's asking if the slides are available, and if the YouTube supervised account allows them to create and publish via YouTube Studio.
Yeah, with regard to the slides, we're making the whole presentation recording available to the person at your school who organized the event for your school. Thank you very much to all the PTO and PTA leaders here tonight for bringing a huge amount of people. Thank you so much for all you did to do that. Just know that your efforts, and we know it's volunteer, have been very fruitful. So we will be sending the PTO and PTA leaders the link to the recording, and you'll be able to get it that way.
I think we need to post that survey link in the chat also.
Yes,
if we can.
Yes, we'll do that as well. I'll put that there now.
There were a lot of questions and discussions earlier in the Q&A, but most of it is scrolled off. So if anybody has a new question, please repost it, either in chat or Q&A.
Yes. And I think there's, I think Michael puts here a lot about, a lot of data around children and the risks around self-harm and suicidality. You know, Michael, I think you bring up a really good and important a point. And I think, you know, the pandemic probably also worsened this. It did worsen this. It absolutely did. And I think it is important for all of us to understand that, you know, encouraging our children, having open conversations about mental health, making sure that there are resources that your children have and know who they can turn to, either at their schools or somewhere in your community. Everybody needs somebody, you know, everybody needs somebody. And the pandemic was truly a collective traumatic experience for all of us. Maybe more for some than others, but it wasn't nothing. It's certainly something.
And
Yes.
as time goes on, more statistics are becoming publicly available, like the ones stated. You know, insurance companies are seeing new trends of claims or suicides or depression. All kinds of new metadata and data mining is starting to accumulate from our time in the pandemic. It may probably, my opinion, shows that being isolated is not socially the best thing. We are social creatures. Some people thrive in it. Some people don't. The majority do not. And even as we go back to work, we're discovering at various companies as they practice their own return to work models, resistance from some and cheers from others for returning to offices. And it's all different. And this is still new again, because before the pandemic, everybody worked from the office, almost everyone. Now, almost everybody works from home. What's the new solution going to be? What's it going to look like next year? Is it going to be 50-50? Are we all going back to the office? Some places, I have clients in some places, they're never going back to the office. During the pandemic, they terminated 5 of their building leases. They plan on never going back to the office. And some clients are planning on going to the office. So all of these things are we're still learning. But it still comes down to the family. We're going to learn together. Keep the conversation open. Keep all of this. It's going to change. We used to say that, you know, things rarely change, and they've changed drastically in the last couple of years. The change has certainly accelerated, and we have to stay on top of it. And we have to keep an open mind with our children, especially with their internet usage and how they use it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the one thing I will say is that there's nothing in life that isn't without risk, the internet included. I think so the question is, what will you do with that knowledge of that risk? You know, we're certainly not going into a world where we're going to live without it. I don't think setting up our children to not use any technology at all sets them up for any kind of success at all. I think it's our job to help them, but also model for them the ways in which you can successfully navigate this online world, knowing that there's still risk, just like getting behind the wheel of a car.
Somebody asked in the question about their personal router suggestions. I don't have any particular, but I can tell you the 3 biggest brand names are the Linksys, the Netgear, and the Asus. All of those are very reputable brands. They've been around for a very long time, and all of them do partner with a security company. Asus, I know, partners with us, Trend Micro, and I believe Linksys partners with Symantec. So when you look at routers for home, see who the security software they partner with Kaspersky has come under attack because it may be linked to Russia because it is based in Russia. My only comments for that are both Russia and China are somewhat totalitarian regimes, along with other countries. As such, any business conducted in those countries is subject to government influence or input. I don't know, and I haven't seen data specifically either way, but I can tell you geopolitically that can be an issue.
Hey, Ron, there's a question. If you could just put in the chat the names of the routers, it sounds like there's interest in that. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring this home, close it out. We're way past the time, but we also always try to stay on as long as needed to answer people's questions. You know, if you still have them, we'll be here. Go ahead and put them. For the rest of you, we really appreciate you staying online and being patient with us and our tech issues. For those of you who are hoping to listen to the session in Spanish, we want to encourage you. There's another session actually tomorrow evening. It's a little bit late for those of you on the East Coast. If you go to our website, I'm going to put this link in the chat. You can see we have a whole number of future events coming up, and we will have a Spanish interpreter for all of these. So in the chat, if you go to that link, you'll see we have another event tomorrow night, and then at least 2 to 3 a month, all the way through until the 1st of June next year. So even for those of you who came tonight and there were people at your school that weren't able to attend, feel free to re-register for Family Tech Talk Night again, so we capture you in our system. The PTO and PTA leaders know what I'm talking about there through the PTO Today site. Re-register, and we will be more than happy to host other members of your school community in a future event, especially if they needed the Spanish interpreter. And if there are additional languages when you register, you can tell us there. If we have enough lead time, we've had up to 3 or 4 different languages available to the audience.
I think I have that tomorrow night.
Yeah.
I think I have 3 languages. Or is it next week?
I think it's tomorrow. I think it might be I might be with you again tomorrow. So awesome. Well, with that, we want to wish you a very good evening, and thank you for being with us for Family Tech Talk Night. Again, please continue the conversations with your family.
And remember to do one thing.
And do that one thing that you've never done before. We would love to hear from you on the feedback. And if you actually do, the survey with us that you see in the link there, then you could win. You could be one of 5 people to win a copy of Trend Micro Internet Security, good for 1 year and up to 5 devices in your home to protect them. So thank you again from Lynette in Boston.
And Ron near us in Texas. Let me just say in Texas. I'm in the middle of nowhere.
And thank you, Kimberly, who's also in Texas, supporting us tonight. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.